I'd like to talk about having agency in grief. But before we talk about that, I would like to introduce myself. I am Ghazala at the Heart and Soul Cafe. If you've been here before, thank you so much for coming back. I so appreciate it. And if you are here for the first time, you're very, very welcome. Thank you for coming. So having agency in grief, I'd like to talk about that. And I'd like to talk about how people make that difficult for those of us who are grieving. So let's talk about it. So things that I decided when I sadly lost my son over 4 years ago, I decided I wanted to do things for others. I decided I wanted to start a charity, which I have done. We've done some good work with that. I'm hoping to do bigger and better things with that charity. I have volunteered for a charity, and I've been doing that for 3.5 years, just over 3.5 years now, where I support, counsel, befriend women who have also experienced child loss. That's been such a fulfilling experience, and I don't ever see myself stopping myself from doing that. What else have I done? I deliver mental health first aid training online and face-to-face. I deliver other training as well, workshops around suicidality, neurodiversity, stress management, all sorts of things like that. So I do that. And then I've started this YouTube channel. This is all around, mental health, grief, bereavement, loss. So there's lots of things that I have done since losing my son. And these are all choices I made. I made a choice. I recorded a video called The Fork in the Road, which really talks about the point after losing my son where I decided that, I had two choices. One of them was to just give in and give up and just wait to die, basically. And the other choice was try to help others. And, so I talked about that. So having agency is really about having the capacity and the ability to make those choices on how you want to develop, shape your life, and how that looks going forward. Now, I have seen in society that sometimes people can be shunned a little bit, or it can be seen as, and people can be quite judging. I think people can judge you, I feel. Let's give you an example. I knew someone who very sadly lost her husband, and she went on to getting remarried. And, some of the comments that I heard were quite sad, really. It was that she was being judged by, wanting to get remarried. But I thought, who are we to judge somebody else? We're not living their life. We're not seeing how lonely it may be, how difficult it may be, how frightening it may be for someone to suddenly, somebody who's lived with someone for 36 years, suddenly is left on their own and living on their own because the children have grown up and got married and left the nest. So it's an empty nest syndrome, possibly before then losing a spouse. Who are we to judge? Who are we to say that's not the right thing to do, and you should be ashamed of yourself, or anything like that? I think it's so easy, isn't it, to judge somebody else, to point the finger at someone else. It's so easy to do that. But if you empathize, if you put yourself into that person's shoes and see the world through their eyes, you probably wouldn't say the things that you are saying or think the things that you are thinking. Just the other day, I had some guests over, and there was a young, and I was so surprised that it was a young lady. She actually talked about, she actually openly, loudly said, I've got a bit of a problem with people getting remarried, and especially getting remarried in quite old age. And I said, oh, why? Why do you have a problem with that? And she said, well, she couldn't really answer me. And she said, well, I'm not really sure. It just makes me it's a little bit uncomfortable. It just makes me cringe a little bit. And I said, well, yeah, but they're still human beings. Just because they're a bit old and crinkly doesn't mean to say that they don't have a heart anymore, and they don't have a soul anymore, and they don't have a mind anymore. They're still a human being. You're saying that from a perspective of a young person who's recently got married and, got a young child, but it's just a classic example, isn't it, about sometimes when very young people think about people who are older, can be quite judgmental, can't they? As if they're in another life of, another world, and I'm never really going to get there. But you'd be surprised how quickly time goes by and how quickly you do find yourself there. If I think about my own life, how did I get to where I am now? It's life goes by so quickly. So when I talk about agency, having agency in grief is for us to have agency in ourselves, but for others to allow people to have that, freely, to, live the life that they feel they want to live, can live, live to the best of their potential, live their life to the best of that they possibly can, if they're working, if they're remarrying, whatever they're doing, running a charity, whatever they're doing, running a YouTube channel, whatever that is, for others not to judge them because they are doing their best. They are doing the thing that they feel they need, want, and deserve. So it's about self-advocacy as well. Having agency in grief, I feel, is so important, to be honest with yourself. What do I need? What is it that I need to do and want to do and feel that I can do in order to live my life to the best of my ability? Yeah. Once you've decided that, it's then, taking steps, even if it's tiny little steps in the right direction, but taking those steps in order to get there. I had a client last week who said to me, Ghazala, I'm feeling so bad. She had sadly lost her child, lost a son. And she said, I'm feeling so bad right now, but Ghazala, I don't want to feel like this forever. I do want to feel better. I do want to, live my life and function. She still has children, and be there for them, and be there for her husband, and be there for, other distant relatives and friends. She said, I still want to be there. And we had that conversation about, and I said, well, first of all, I said to her, I'm so glad that you shared that with me, because you saying that out loud is so empowering, because it means that you are in a place right now that you are in, and you're acknowledging that, but you're also acknowledging that hopefully with time, because time won't fix it, but time will hopefully get you to a place where you can then move forward with and function with. And for you to say that out loud is one step forward, one step towards that. We don't know how long it's going to take, and no one's holding no one's, looking at their watch, stopwatch. No one's doing that. No one's no one should be pressurizing that person to get into the place where they're saying that they want to be any quicker than they, until they're ready, and no one can do that for that person. That person has to get there themselves. That doesn't mean to say without any support. They can have support, of course they can, and she is getting support, but ultimately it's you that has to make that decision. It's you that has to take those steps. It's you that has to think about what it is where do I want to be in a few years' time, and what is that going to look like? What is my life going to look like? What are people around me, what do I want them to see? What kind of influence do I want to be on their lives, on my friends' lives, on my loved ones' lives, on other people's lives? So when it came to myself, when I talk about having having agency in grief for me is I want to be the best version of myself that I possibly can be as a result of what has happened, as a result of losing my son, as a result of something so awful that's happened in my life. I want to be the best version of myself as a result of that. So, those were my choices. Those were things that I wanted. And, have I found it difficult? Not really, because I found that once I made that decision and once I made peace with the world and the universe and stopped feeling like a victim and started feeling, well, not like a victim, I felt that things started falling into place and falling into my lap, if you like. It was very much that once I'd made that decision and made peace with myself and the world, that things started falling into place. And over 4 years later, here I am talking about grief, bereavement, loss, mental health, working in mental health, counselling, supporting women who have also experienced child loss, having those conversations with people, having conversations in my mental health work, mental health first aid training, people sharing about all sorts of loss and mental health struggles that people experience, that they've experienced in their lives. So, talking about these things, usually every day, a lot of days in the week, not every day of the week, that would be quite difficult. But, a lot of the days in the week, I'm actually having these discussions with others. And it's not just having those discussions, is it? It's having that, making those connections. And because when you talk about mental health and when you talk about grief and when you talk about things that are really important to people, you make that deeper connection, don't you? It's not, if I was, let's say, my work was selling handbags, well, I probably wouldn't have a meaningful conversation with every single person that comes into the store, or however I'm selling them, having a meaningful conversation with every single customer. That probably wouldn't happen. But when you talk about mental health and when you talk about loss and when you talk about grief and how the impact it has on our lives, and we share our own experiences with others, and we can say, I'm not really in this by myself, am I? I'm not actually alone. But it means that I need to reach out to others. Otherwise, it does feel quite lonely. Grieving can feel quite lonely. Mental health struggles can leave you feeling quite lonely, even if you have lots of people around you. Because if you have lots of people around you, that doesn't mean to say you're not going to feel lonely, because it's a matter of connecting and relating to. And if you can't relate to people around you, even if you're in crowds and crowds of hordes and hordes of people, if you can't relate to anybody, you are going to feel lonely, aren't you? So it's all a matter of that. So it's not judging others, because it might be that, oh, look at the way he's behaving, or look at the way she's behaving, and she's, just had this loss. And, well, who are we to judge? How do we know what that person is going through? And just because there's a smile on someone's face and they're wearing a bright color, does not mean to say that they are always happy in a, sort of in that best possible mindset, and everything is good and everything is all joyful. That does not mean to say that. We don't know what people are carrying unless they share it with us. Because there's so much going on underneath, that outward exterior. There's so much, inside that we don't know about unless people share. And we can only share if we, if we're doing things like this, if we're discussing and we're talking and we're sharing, that helps others share. And when it helps others share, we then change the culture around mental health, talking about grief, bereavement, loss, because there's a lot of these subjects are quite taboo and they're uncomfortable. We don't want to talk about them. We just want to brush them under the carpet and pretend that they're not there and, make them go away. Well, they're not going to go away. We know that grief doesn't go away. It, it comes and it can consume you. So we have to give these things time. We have to discuss. We have to talk about. We have to process all of it. Yeah. But how we do it is all about having agency in grief. For me and for all of you who are grieving out there, it's having that agency. It's having the ability to be what you want to be. Allow your experience to evolve you, change you in however you think is best for you. The best version of yourself, if that means whatever that means in life, whatever that means for you, is to hold on to that, because that's yours. It belongs to you. Yeah, own it. Yeah. So, thank you for listening to this video. I hope you found the content of it helpful. Please do share if you feel that the content of this video would help somebody else who's maybe grieving and maybe going through this very thing about questioning, what's my life looking like? Where am I going? Oh, I want to do this, but what would people think? All about that, Yeah. Do comment, do like, subscribe, and thank you for watching the video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Until then, look after your hearts and souls. Thank you.